Okay, I'm going to start with a preemptive apology. It's starting to get a lot cooler here in Bendigo, so I have spent my morning transferring my recording studio into my art studio, which is a much warmer part of the house. It has carpet, it is a enclosed room, and it has morning sunshine and a nice comfy couch for the dogs. Now, that said, I will also explain you will most likely hear scratching noises or noises in the background that are basically mouse investigating this new part of the house, because normally it is shut off because, of course, being an art studio, there were things within reach of puppies that I didn't want him to get to. They are now no longer in reach, hopefully, but there's still plenty of exploring to be done. So I'm hoping that I will still get this video out today, just perhaps a little late. However, if I don't get it out today, I am just now apologising in advance for not managing to do so, due of course to a morning spent moving rooms. And of course, as someone with ADHD, I do find it somewhat distracting when Mouse is trying to dig under the couch or burrow into spots around this room where he possibly shouldn't be, which of course leads to paused recording. So, with that said, I am now going to jump in and take a look at part 3 of this interview with Angelica. Now, I would just like to thank everyone for their comments on the previous video. I know that I am way behind yet again with responding to comments. Seems like there's continual distractions, such as moving rooms. So thank you for your comments. They have been read, and I will do my best to get to answering as many as I possibly can, as soon as I can. I think, given the assistance that I'm getting with this video and the assistance that I got with Angelica's previous video, I think over the next week, in between making videos, I will put together a summary video, I guess you could say, of what is important for us to take away from these interviews with the flatmates. So on that note, let's just jump in and listen to the rest of this.
Do you think Jennifer had anything to do with Maddie being hurt?
Que si usted cree que Jennifer tuvo algo que ver con Maddie, con lo que pasó con Maddie.
Para nada. Para nada.
Not the least bit, she says.
De todo corazón, para nada.
So with all her heart, she doesn't think so.
Now, I mentioned in yesterday's video that the translators who are doing this are in fact also police officers, so they're bilingual police officers. So they're not professional translators, which is the reason why we've been struggling so much with this. But the takeaway here is he's asked her basically if she believes Jenn had anything to do with Maddie being hurt. And her response was no. And it sounds like she's saying, you know, with all my heart, I don't believe that, or something along those lines. That is definitely one of those things that I would love a clearer translation for. I do want to add the observation here that, to me, Angelica appears to be the sort of person who believes the best in people. So I would imagine that even if she had, like, something deep down, this idea that Jenn may have played a role in what happened to Maddie, I think she would have rejected that. So I think we have to keep that in mind when she's saying that she doesn't think Jenn had any part in it, and she believes it with all her heart.
Do you think Stefan hurt Maddie?
¿Se cree que Stefan le hizo daño a ella?
¿A quién? ¿A Mari?
A Mari.
Sí.
Pues yes.
Is that because what she's seen on the news,
¿Eso
or
es porque basado en lo que viste en las noticias o por alguna otra razón?
O sea, que él le hacía daño, no por lo que pasó en la noticia, porque ni yo, imagínate que ni yo nunca creí que él de verdad le hiciera algo a la niña. Y sí, no sé, pues tuvo que haberle hecho algo.
Pero el pensado de que él le hizo daño a ella, ¿eso es basado en lo que viste en las noticias o por alguna otra observación que has hecho?
No, para nada, por lo que vi en las noticias.
So it's based on solely on the news instead of just on news.
Ujú.
I had to clarify if it was based on the news or based on anything else she's observed here.
okay?
Okay, I find that really interesting. So, on one hand, when he asks her, do you think Stefan hurt Maddie? She immediately comes out with yes. There's no hesitation, no having to stop and think about it, no language that would convey any level of doubt. It's just straight out yes. But then when asked if that's because of the news or because of other things, she says based solely on the news. Now, I don't believe that she is lying. I believe that she's still processing what has happened. This is a week on, and she's still trying to wrap her head around it. So why am I saying this? Because she was pretty damn quick to say yes. And the thing is, yes, you could say based solely on the news, but most people, if they hear that someone did something really, really terrible and they know that person, then they're not readily just going to accept the news. They're going to think about what they know about that person, their past interactions with that person, how that person presents themselves. And you are not necessarily going to just immediately accept when you've been told that someone did something really, really hideous. You're not going to immediately accept it unless you are someone who's just not capable of critical thinking, not capable of logical thinking, and is willing to put aside your own understandings and your own interpretations of things. And I don't think Angelica is that kind of person. She is extremely observant. She has seen everything that's gone on in that house. So her not conveying any doubt when she steps in and says yes, she thinks that Stefan does it, or that Stefan did it, her not conveying any doubt says to me that actually on a subconscious level she definitely does believe that he did it, meaning that she had to have had some notion in her head already that he was capable of doing it. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that extremely well, but basically for her to just readily accept, yes, definitely he did it, that's got to be more than just what you've seen on the news. I'm going to probably, just to give a clarification, you may have heard of the mass shooting that occurred in Australia in 1996, and it was at a little place called Port Arthur. And I'm not going to name the gunman because for me, I'm not going to give him that. But when it was announced on the news precisely who that individual was, and that came with images, I immediately recognised him from when I was a young child. And his parents lived next door to my grandparents. And we were afraid of him. My grandmother had the biggest backyard imaginable, with like every fruit tree you could want, and down the back corner there was this gorgeous big old willow tree that we used to play under. And he used to come and climb up on the rails of the fence and just watch us play. And there was something about him that he was a little bit older than myself and my sister, but there was something about him that just used to really scare us. And whatever it was, we basically reached the point where if we were out playing and he turned up and climbed up on the fence and started watching us, we would head back inside and play inside instead. So when I heard on the news who this gunman was, and I saw the photo of him, which confirmed that it was precisely the person that I thought it was, I really wasn't overly shocked. There was something about him from day one. Not only that, I remember being afraid of his mother. His older sister, I think older or younger, his sister used to come to our place for music lessons. I know she was older than me, and I distinctly remember that at the end of, or towards the end of her music lesson each time, when I knew that her mother was coming to pick her up, I would head outside and play out in the backyard because I didn't want to be around when her mother came to pick her up. And that was me as a young child, just having some sort of vibes from that woman that scared the bejesus out of me. So for Natalie to so readily accept that, yes, Stearns did it, that brings to mind my own past experiences. And it does make me think that there were instances in the past, or just her own observations all round of him, that made it easy for her to simply accept it. It didn't require any processing time. She didn't actually require time to think it through before answering the question. She knew. She had no doubts.
When did you hear the power tools?
¿En qué momento usted vio la herramienta?
Ese lunes en la noche. Monday
at night.
in the night.
Monday at night?
Monday por la noche.
El lunes fue que me dicen que ya está perdida Mari. ¿Fue el lunes?
She's asking if Monday was when she was missing.
Yes.
Ese lunes en la noche,
Monday night.
todos estábamos acá sentados.
Everyone was sitting here.
Y estaban las herramientas acá.
And the tools were here. ¿Qué herramientas usted vio?
Yo le había comentado que yo había hecho un martillo y habían dos al lado, pero no me di cuenta de
Two
cuáles
other
eran las
items,
otras dos.
and then she doesn't really know what the other two things were, but they were laid out here on the table.
Okay, but when she heard the power tools being used, it was Monday night, not Monday morning?
Pero
No.
cuando los oyó, que él estaba usando la herramienta, ¿cuándo fue?
El lunes en la mañana yo escuché como un aquí en casa
Monday
dentro.
morning, inside the house, she heard something that sounded like a power tool.
Okay, well, that just kind of adds to the confusion, doesn't it? So he's asked her when she heard the power tools on the Monday. And she starts talking about Monday night, everyone was sitting there, and there were 3 tools laid out on the table, a hammer and 2 tools that she can't identify. So then you have the detective asking for clarification. So you heard that, when did you hear the power tools? Did you hear them Monday night? And she clarifies with, no, Monday morning she heard a drill. I know that that's what she said in terms of the type of power tool. Thanks to one of my bilingual subscribers, who mentioned it when we looked at the first video. So basically, we seem to have 2 different lots of tools that were used. It appears that in the morning he was doing something with a power drill, and then in the evening there were 3 tools laid out on the table, one of which was a hammer. The other 2 things that she was uncertain of. This is where it would have been good to ask if those other 2 tools were hand tools or power tools. And yes, judging by the snoring, I would say that Amira is quite happy with the move into the art studio.
Okay. Alright, and she's 100% sure she didn't hear or see anybody by the time she went to bed on Sunday to when she woke up on Monday.
Que si estás 100% segura que no viste a alguien cuando llegaste, dice Sunday night to Monday morning,
Yeah.
cuando llegaste domingo por la noche, cuando te levantaste el lunes por la mañana, ¿estás segura que no viste a nadie?
No, estoy segura. Yo no vi a
Sure.
nadie. No vi a
Didn't see
nadie.
anybody.
Okay, and the only noises she heard was the...
Ujú.
Los sonidos que oíste era cuando alguien estaba poniendo algo.
Exacto.
Now, that's coming from the room, or do you think that's somebody coming up and down the stairs?
Que eso era, te lo identificó como
Del
eso
cuarto.
venía del cuarto específicamente,
Sí,
o
del
piensa que
cuarto.
me viera alguien subiendo por las escalas.
No, del cuarto.
She said no, it's
Del
specifically
cuarto.
the room.
Okay.
So she's 100% certain that she didn't hear or see anyone from when she went to bed on Sunday to when she got up or woke up Monday morning. I'm a little bit frustrated that he hasn't asked her if she's a light sleeper or a heavy sleeper, because I think that is important at this point in time. I know he asked her earlier if basically if she was asleep she might hear things, but I think it's important also to just clarify. I mean, it may be that the reason she hears things sometimes is because she's just happened to wake up at a particular time, or it could be that she's a really light sleeper and hears a lot. But if she's a really light sleeper, then I'm very surprised that she didn't hear anything. And again, he asks for confirmation in terms of the noises she heard. did she only hear the banging noises or did she hear other noises? And she's saying definitely only the banging and it was definitely from room 4. So again, this would have been another opportunity to mention the television blaring, if indeed it was. So I do find that particularly interesting.
And just to clarify, you don't know where Jen was Sunday night.
Solo para clarificar, usted no sabía dónde estaba Jen el domingo por la noche.
So you don't know if Jen was upstairs or downstairs.
No sé.
Okay.
Pero Jen, o sea, la verdad Jen siempre estaba acá abajo. O sea, ella
Que
no...
usualmente se la pasaba.
Sí.
So usually Jen would be downstairs normally. So.
Okay, so he's asked her here if she knew where Jen was. You don't know where Jen was Sunday night, upstairs or downstairs. And even before he asked upstairs or downstairs, she said no, she didn't know where Jen was Sunday night, which is when he clarified with upstairs or downstairs, and she said Jen is usually downstairs. Now, I have a question, and I can't remember whether it was with this interview or the previous interview, but someone who was translating for me mentioned that when it comes to Jen, that if she was in her room, you would have seen a light in her room. Now, I'm possibly misquoting, but the reason I'm saying that is, why did he not ask her if there was any lights on in Jen's room or anything like that, rather than just, stopping at her saying, well, Jen's usually downstairs? Because obviously asking, did you see any lights on in Jen's room, may have offered some clarification. And what is particularly interesting about this is that while we have been given very, very little information with regards to Jen and very little data relating to her phone, we do know that she sent that message to Stearns at 11:39 and that her phone was put on the charger at 11:54. So to me that suggests that there should at the very least have been like some amount of glow coming from the room, from the phone. And let's face it, these days when you're in a dark room with a phone, the screens are so damn big that they do light up quite a lot. And you can see that Jen's was one of the larger style iPhones. So, it wasn't put on the charger till 11:54, long after Angelica went upstairs. So maybe that's so commonplace that she doesn't even register when she goes past Jen's room now, whether or not the lights are on or if there's like a glow coming from the phone or anything like that. Because surely she would know that's where Jen was if she had seen that there was a light on in Jen's room or that there was a glow coming from the phone.
Okay. This may be a weird question, but when Jen would be sleeping, do you hear snoring or anything like that to make sure she's in there?
Cuando Jen estaba dormida, la oía ella roncando o algo que indicaba que ella estaba dormida o...
No, ella no ronca.
She said she doesn't snore. So.
No, ella no ronca. Nunca llegué a escucharla. Pero sí sé que se quedaba dormida profunda.
So she never heard of it. She knows that she would go into like a deep, very deep sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, would the light be on or off?
Cuando ella...
Oh. Sí.
Okay. If Jen is awake, would the light be on or off?
Si
puedes
Jen,
repetir?
si Jen estaba despierta, la luz se mantenía prendida o apagada.
Con el televisor prendido más que todo.
So
O sea,
mainly
si
the
estaba
TV
despierta.
would be on if she was awake.
Y esa noche que llegué estaba
And
apagado todo.
that night when she came, everything was off.
Okay, I find this extremely interesting and a little bit baffling. So, he's asked her if there's noises that she would normally hear that would show that Jenn was there and asleep, like snoring. She says, well, Jenn doesn't snore. And he asks her if she heard her at all through the night. And she said, well, no, because she goes into a very deep sleep. Now, the next part of the conversation I definitely need a bit of help with because I'm a little confused. He's asked her just straight out, are lights on or off? Now, I think that is referring to if Jenn is there and Jenn is asleep. And it sounded like she said on, that the translator confirmed it, and she said si, yes. But then he asks her if Jen's awake, is the light on or off? And she says mainly if she's awake the TV will be on. And then when asked about the Monday night, she says everything was off. Now, she arrived home at around 11:30. We have Jenn claiming that she sent Stefan and Maddie upstairs at around 11 o'clock. We know that Jenn messaged Stefan at 11:39 to tell him Maddie needs to go to bed now. We also know that Jen's phone was placed on the charger at 11:54. So why was there nothing on in Jen's room? Why is it that Angelica is unsure, doesn't know if Jenn was there on the Sunday night? And the biggest question is, why are they even asking that question? Do they have data that shows that Jenn was in a different location in that townhouse on the Sunday night? I mean, we have them asking Jenn if she's got an Apple Watch. And she says yes. And if she was wearing it on the Sunday night. And she says she rarely wears her Apple Watch. They also asked her, curiously, if maybe her phone would have been, if she had picked her phone up at any time through the night after heading to bed, or maybe it would have recorded steps or something like that. These are all questions which, to me, sound like they are trying to establish some sort of movement from Jenn. Could she have been in a different part of the townhouse? It's just really curious that they're asking these questions. I mean, I think we can be pretty certain, based on the data, that she was in the townhouse. We know from the cell tower data that that phone arrived at that house around 10:30. It was placed on a charger a little bit before midnight. It was removed from the charger a little bit after 9 and the alarm was turned off. No one else was in the house to do that in the morning, so definitely Jenn was there. But why the question over signs of Jenn actually being there. Was she in a different part of the townhouse? But if so, why then would she be texting Stefan and telling him Maddie needs to go to bed now? This is very, very odd. And I'm not quite sure what to think about it. But I definitely can't help thinking that something wasn't right on that Sunday night. I don't believe that Jenn saw Maddie, but I don't know how to tie all these little bits and pieces together.
Okay, what about upstairs? Was the light on or off in Stefan's room?
Estaba prendida la luz.
So the light was on in Stefan's room.
Okay, when you came down for breakfast the next day, was his light on or off?
Cuando estaba para el desayuno el siguiente día,
In Jennifer's room?
si la luz
Apagada.
estaba apagada. Off.
Off. Okay. Would that mean Jen's still sleeping or gone?
No sé.
You don't know.
No tengo idea.
So I would have been extremely surprised had she said that the light wasn't on in Stefan's room when she went upstairs. But again, that to me seems to be yet another indication that Maddie was rugged, shall we say? Because if the light was on, it was 11:30, then surely Maddie would still be... You would have heard voices. And we have Jenn, who was apparently so certain that Maddie didn't use any of her social media on Sunday night, which again points to Maddie having come home from the party and being given something by Stearns so that she was well and truly out cold by the time Jenn got home. Now, he's trying to clarify the timeline here because, like I said in yesterday's video, try as she might, Angelica's strong point is not accurate time frames. So what he's clearly doing here is basically trying to establish the morning time frame. So when you went down for breakfast, was Jen's light on or off? She said it was off. Would that mean she's still asleep or she's gone? And she says, I don't know. Based on everything we've heard throughout this interview, I do believe that she went down for breakfast around 10:30ish, not 9:30ish. So no, Jenn would not have been there, and Stefan would have been. And she does mention seeing Stefan.
Okay. At what point did you leave this townhome Monday? Like, go outside?
¿A qué hora se salió de aquí el lunes?
El lunes como a las 3:40 de la tarde.
Físicamente se fue de aquí.
Sí.
Around 3:40 me dijiste?
Como 3:40 más o menos. Y él,
Around 3:40 p.m.
y él estaba acá.
and he was here.
Me despedí de él y todo.
She said goodbye and left.
Okay. Was Jen's car outside when you left?
Yo creo que no recuerdo. Yo creo que no
Doesn't
estaba, no
recall.
recuerdo. No recuerdo. Pero yo no la escuché a ella acá.
But she didn't hear her here.
So it sounds like her and Jenn didn't cross paths at all on that Monday. She's saying she left at around 3:40, so I'm going to guess that she probably headed to work and started work around 4. And she's saying that when she left, Stefan was there and she said goodbye to him, but she doesn't recall hearing Jenn and she can't recall seeing her car. And that fits. And I'm going to say that she's probably got that time nailed if that fits in with her heading to work. And based on what time she finished the previous night, I would say that's probably what was going on here. So it sounds like when she went down for breakfast in the morning was when Jenn was already off at her appointment. And then later, when she went down for lunch, was a somewhat late lunch after Jenn had already gone to collect Maddie. And, you know, that's normal. If you work late shifts, then your meal times can be kind of out of whack through the day. So basically, with these questions, he's just clarifying her timeline based more on where Jenn and Stefan were at particular times as opposed to specific times, knowing that she hasn't been able to give overly clear times.
Where would Jenn keep her like car keys?
Jen, ¿dónde mantenía las llaves del carro?
En su cuarto, nunca
They were
acá.
never out here in her room.
Okay. Did you ever see Natalie on Monday?
Que si yo vi a Natalie el lunes, no. Natalie salió temprano.
Natalie left
Sí,
early, so
ella siempre sale más temprano.
that she
siempre
would always
sale
leave
más temprano.
earlier than her.
So just an important detail to note here, because I know there was some debate from people way back in the past claiming that Jenn's car keys were kept outside of her room. But we had Jenn in an interview basically saying they are hung up in her room next to the door. And we have just had that confirmed with with Angelica. She doesn't say next to the door, but she says basically Jenn keeps her car keys in her room. Which means that on the Monday night, when Stefan took Jenn's car and went out driving, he had to have gone into her room to collect those keys.
Okay. Have you talked to Jennifer since all this happened?
Que si has hablado con Jennifer desde que todo esto pasó.
Claro,
So of course,
estoy con ella apoyándola, por
was
supuesto.
supporting her.
Okay. How's her demeanor now?
¿Cómo se ve? ¿Cómo aparenta ella?
Ella está mal.
She's bad.
Ayer estábamos conversando y no podemos creer que esto esté pasando.
They were talking yesterday and they couldn't believe this was happening.
Okay, that's a really odd answer. So she said that, yeah, she's supporting Jenn. And he asks, what's Jenn's demeanour like? And she says, they were talking yesterday and we couldn't believe this was happening. That's not a description of Jenn's demeanour. That's not her saying Jenn's devastated. Jenn seems like she hasn't slept in a week. Jenn looks exhausted. Jenn keeps bursting into tears. It's just a simple statement of they couldn't believe this was happening. Is she protecting Jenn here? Is she reluctant to specifically refer to Jenn's demeanour because maybe Jenn's demeanour doesn't actually match what you would expect from a mother whose child was found unalived a week earlier? And of course the question there also is, how were they talking? Were they talking on the phone? Were they communicating via text? Because I will at times refer to talking to people when I've been basically talking to them via text, carrying on a conversation. To me, in my mind, that's still talking. So if I've sat there and I've had like a lengthy communication with someone, that I may refer to it as talking. So how were they talking? Face to face, over the phone, text message, in what way? This is kind of important. And meanwhile, why was he satisfied with that answer? Or did she add something in to what she said specifically with regards to demeanor and I've just missed it?
Did you see any of the interviews on the news?
¿Usted vio algunas de las entrevistas en las noticias?
Algunas sí.
She said some.
Okay. Is the way Jennifer is talking, is that normal for her?
La manera que Jennifer estaba hablando en esas entrevistas, eso es normal, la manera que ella
Like her tone?
habló en esas entrevistas, el tono.
No, yo la veo, ella siempre que está, o sea, ella estaba, yo la veo en esa entrevista como ida, la verdad.
She sees her in the interviews as kind of far gone, like just distant.
When did she start seeing that type of behavior?
¿Cómo ese comportamiento, como cuando se empezó a ver eso? O cuando se dio cuenta que ella empezó a actuar así.
¿Pero
Dice que
de
ella
ese
se-
mismo día? ¿O me estás preguntando?
Se me dice que usted la vio en la entrevista, que estaba como que distante, de cuando empezó a notar eso, que empezó eso.
No sé, es que yo llegué esa noche en la casa y ella estaba llorando. O sea, Ida no estaba en ese momento, él sí.
She said that night she saw that she was obviously upset.
Y ella solo lloraba y me decía, mi Mari se perdió. Mi Mari está perdida.
And then she would just say, Maddie's lost.
Now that to me is extremely revealing. So she saw Jenn on the news and he asked her, was she acting like normal? And she said, no, she sees her as far gone or distant. Just confirm the translation for that, please, if that is actually what she used in terms of describing Jenn's demeanour with that. So, far gone or distant, to me, is not what I would expect to see from a parent whose child is missing, a parent who is concerned about their child being missing, but is also hopeful that their child would be returned and found. When I hear someone being described as being far gone or distant, to me that is someone who is somewhat shell-shocked, someone who has just experienced some sort of immense trauma, such as your child being unalived and you are aware of it. Which is why, of course, I'm wanting a confirmation with the translation to know if that is exactly what he said. And then coupled with every other thing we've heard said, what she said next to me was extremely revealing. He wanted to know when she first started seeing that sort of behaviour, and she says that night she saw that she was obviously upset. She cried and she said Maddie is lost. Again, please confirm the translation of that for me, because if Angelica is actually saying that that's what Jenn said, then when you couple that with the multitude of times that Jenn said Maddie never made it, it certainly points more to Maddie being her knowing that Maddie wasn't alive at that point in time. Because saying Maddie is lost is not what I would expect to hear if she believed Maddie was missing. I would expect to hear Maddie is missing, or we can't find Maddie. Maddie didn't come out from school in the afternoon, and it turns out she never went to school. Anything that indicates a child having gone missing, as opposed to a child just being gone. Gone as in lost. When you refer to something specifically as being lost, then basically the implication there is that it's gone for good. You may refer to a child being lost in the woods, for example, but you're not just going to turn around and say the child is lost, because that has a completely different meaning. So, yeah, just if you can confirm for me if that is the word that she used, because if so, then to me that is definitely another indication that Jenn did know what happened.
Did she ever, when she takes medicine, does she act the same way or any different?
Cuando ella toma el medicamento, ¿ella actúa de alguna forma diferente o...?
Siempre dice que los tiene que tomar para poder tranquilizarse. Y sí me he dado cuenta porque ella sufre mucho como de ansiedad. Ella...
she takes the medicine to calm herself down. She suffers from anxiety.
Incluso cuando salíamos juntas, a veces le daba temor estar fuera de casa.
Sometimes when they would get out, she would be scared to be out in public and stuff. Kind of like anxiety.
Entonces le daba mucha ansiedad y siempre sí noté ese comportamiento como
She would always note that type of behavior.
de ansiedad,
Like anxious behavior.
Okay, so he's asking her about Jenn's meds, and she's saying that Jenn takes them to calm herself down. She suffers from anxiety, and she even has anxiety about being out in public. And her behaviour is always anxious behaviour. So, without being really, really specific, she's essentially saying that what she normally sees from Jenn is anxiety, not this spaced out, far away reaction that she was giving in the news conference. And honestly, what Angelica is describing here certainly doesn't really fit with what we've seen of Jenn. Now, obviously, that's not something that we could really take to the bank and say, well, look at this, the difference in her behaviour, because obviously at the time that her child was missing. However, these descriptions, to me, do kind of tend to fit more with someone who has lost their child, as in their child is deceased, as opposed to someone whose child is missing. Even down to her saying Maddie is lost and referring to Maddie as having never made it.
Alright, just so I'm clear, if Jennifer's home and awake, the light would be on in her room.
Solo para aclarar, si Jenn estuviera presente aquí en la casa la luz estaría prendida.
No, pero el televisor sí prendido.
So, no, but the TV would be on. If Jen,
Si
yeah,
está
if Jen was
despierta,
here,
si ella está despierta,
if
el
she's
televisor
awake,
está
the
prendido.
TV would be on.
Ujú.
Okay. And if she is asleep, she
Sí,
only
solo
sleeps here,
Y ella solo duerme aquí.
and the lights would be off.
Y todas las luces estarían apagadas.
Sí.
All right. And when you got home at 11:30 on Sunday night, those lights were off.
¿Me puedes repetir?
Sí, cuando usted llegó esa noche a las 11:30,
Ujú.
las luces estaban, todas las luces
Aquí estaba apagado.
y el televisor.
Si yo no escuché el televisor.
So all the lights were off and she did not hear a TV.
Okay. But the room where Stefan stays, the lights were on.
Pero el cuarto donde estaba Stefan,
La luz estaba prendida y los sonidos que yo escuchaba.
the lights were on and she was hearing the noises.
Okay. So between 11:30 and the time you fell asleep, excuse me, between 11:30 and the time you fell asleep, did you ever come back down here?
Que si desde las 11:30 que llegaste hasta cuando te quedaste dormida,
Yo no escuché las escaleras que él bajara.
y usted bajó aquí para alguna
No,
cosa.
yo no bajé. O sea, yo ya me acosté a
She
dormir.
did not hear anybody on the stairs and she did not come down here either.
Did she ever go to the bathroom?
¿Usted se levantó a ir al baño?
Durante la noche no.
Okay. So when you got home, did you ever go to the back and forth to the bathroom after you got home?
After she got home.
After she got home, did she ever go back and forth to the
Usted llegó a
bathroom?
la casa, que si usted antes de que se dormía, si fue al baño o si bajaste.
No, no, no. Yo usé el baño cuando llegué, me duché, me arreglé, me cepillé y yo luego entro a mi habitación y no bajé yo no bajé las escaleras de nuevo. Me quedé en mi habitación.
Okay, so he's asking clarifying questions. If Jen's home and awake, the television would be on. If she's asleep, then the lights would be off. But then we get this interesting question in terms of, would Jenn only sleep here? As in, would Jenn only sleep in her room? Meaning, you know, would she sleep anywhere else in the townhouse? That is a rather fascinating question, given the questions that have been asked of Jenn, and given his need to really, really clarify here that Jenn didn't appear to be awake in her room, there didn't appear to be any sound coming from her room, all the lights were off. She makes it clear that when she arrived home, the lights were off in Jenn's room. There was no sound, but she did hear sound from Stefan's room. This is really, really interesting for me. Because we know that Jenn texted Stefan. We know that Jen's phone wasn't put onto the charger until shortly before midnight. So why was her room completely dark like she was asleep? It's extremely odd. What do you do the moment you go to bed, when you are ready to settle down and go to sleep? After you've been fiddling around for a while and you're ready to go to sleep, you're ready to turn the light off, go to sleep. I always put my phone on the charger. Jen's phone was put on the charger at 5 to 12. Could she have fallen asleep and forgotten to put it on the charger? Possible. But she was sending a message at 20 to 12, 15 minutes before it was put on the charger. So why did it appear that her room was completely black, completely dark. I'm extremely curious to know if previously, when Maddie's been upstairs with Stefan, if on those occasions Jenn has texted Stefan at a particular time and said, Maddie needs to go to bed now. I'm curious to know if there has been text communication between Jenn and Stefan on these previous occasions when Maddie was upstairs with Stefan. And I'm really curious to know how this damn pup keeps finding random things like beads, pieces of Lego, and a dangly dragonfly when I'm pretty certain that I moved everything up out of reach in this art studio. But going back to Jenn and Stefan. So, by Angelica's description, Jenn was well and truly asleep by the time Angelica got home. There was no lights on. She didn't hear any noise from Jenn's room. And yet, only a short time later, there is a message sent from Jenn's phone to Stefan saying, Maddie needs to go to bed now. And then a short while after that, Jenn's phone is finally put on the charger at 5 to 12. Well, according to Jenn, when she takes her medications, that's it, she's out for the night. Although we know that she does wake up for various things. But what is bothering me here is the fact that by appearances, Jenn has essentially settled in for the night. She's turned the lights off, gone to sleep, and yet not long after Natalie comes home, you get this text message going from Jenn's phone, and yet still, let's say hypothetically, Jenn did fall asleep. She woke up, heard Natalie arrive, sent a message to Stefan saying, Maddie's got to go to bed. Wouldn't you realise then that you hadn't put your phone on the charger and put your phone on the charger as opposed to doing so 15 minutes later? And we know that she didn't drift off watching television because otherwise Angelica would have heard the television, would have seen that the light was on. None of that happened. So, how is it that Jenn, who supposedly, once she's out for the count, her room was completely dark, was completely silent, and then we get a text message, and 15 minutes later the phone being put on a charger. Now, we could say that, well, Natalie's not good with time. We've seen that throughout the interview. But the thing is, this is her getting home from work. So, no matter how bad you are at keeping track of time, you tend to know what time you finish work and get home from work. And you tend to know what time you leave for work. So it seems logical that she is correct with her time when she said that she got home at 11:30. it's not something that she's going to mistake. So, was Jenn not in that downstairs master bedroom? Was she somewhere else in the townhouse? Or was Jenn perhaps already out to it and someone else sent the message on her phone and then put the phone on the charger? Because I had already been speculating with regards to Maddie's phone going upstairs at 11:19, and I had wondered if that was actually Maddie taking her phone upstairs or someone else. I have all these questions about the Sunday night and not a lot of logical answers.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you again. I may have to talk to you another time, if that's okay.
Gracias, que quizás en el futuro tendría que hablar con usted otra vez.
Okay. This interview will be concluded at 1:50 p.m.
So that brings us to the end of the interviews with the flatmates, or at least that we know of. Maybe there were later interviews with both of them for further clarification, but honestly, it seems to me like Detective Morris is just a little bit slack, and I would imagine that any additional interviews would have in fact occurred with state attorneys as opposed to Kissimmee. I can certainly see why they have deposed Angelica, because I think she's a very, very important witness. And I can't help thinking, from the questions that were being asked of Angelica, that they have some very, very interesting information with regards to Jenn that they're sitting on, something that hasn't been released. And it certainly makes me think that perhaps whatever they've got on Jenn may in fact be something that they definitely don't want Stearns' defence to get hold of, hence the reason we've not seen any charges against Jenn. I have of course also speculated that they're determined to get the maximum penalty against Stearns, which means that they want to convince the jury in every single way possible, and having Jenn as a free woman is going to allow them to create this impression of her as the mother who lost her child, had nothing to do with it, create some sympathy with the jury that will help to convict Stearns. So I actually think that there's probably a lot of reasons here why we haven't seen Jenn arrested yet, and I'm certainly not losing hope. The only concerns I do have is that I'm not overly wrapped with Detective Morris. So, on that note, I'm going to finish this off here. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, your observations, and if you are bilingual, your translations. And of course, also to see if you guys have some more logical answers that I may have not considered. So on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.